Hi everyone and welcome back to our podcast. I'm Sofia and joining me today is my amazing co-host Sharifah Nisrin.
Hello everyone, it's great to be here again. Today we have something really interesting to share, a topic that's about children, language, and how the way we speak actually reflects who we are.
Yes, our podcast today is titled Voice of Childhood, Understanding Social Dialects in Children Language. We will be talking about two research articles that explore how children learn and use language and how social dialect appear both in stories and in real life.
And to make this even more exciting, we have two special guests joining us virtually, which is Fatin and Lisa.
Hi everyone, so happy to be part of this.
I'm excited to discuss this topic too.
Awesome, so we have divided this episode into a few parts. First, we will give an overview of both articles, then we will dive into analysis and discussion. And finally, we will share our personal thoughts and takeaways.
So let's start with a quick overview. The main focus of our review is social dialects among children. So basically, it's about how children's way of speaking can show their social identity, relationships, and even power differences in families or society.
Exactly, Nisrin. We studied two articles. The first one is by Nurhayani and Rosin, 2022, and the title is Social Dialect Between Children and Parents in Short Stories of Boo Boo Magazine. And the second one is by Wagner, Klopper and Pate 2014 called Children Perception of Dialect Variation.
Yes, both articles talk about children and dialects, but they look at the topic from different angles. One through literature and the other through experiments.
Alright, so now let's start with the first article by Nurhayani and Rosin. So this article focuses on how parents and children's speech are represented in short story from Bobo magazine. So this short story is a famous children's magazine in Indonesia.
Right. The authors analyzed 16 stories published between January and July 2020 using qualitative content analysis. They look at who was speaking, where they were speaking, what they are talking about, and why.
And they found that language in these stories actually reflects family roles. For example, parents really use imperative sentence like giving instruction or comments, while the children respond with questions, complaint, or expressive remarks.
That's true. And I think it's interesting how they found three types of variation: morphological, syntactic, and lexical. Basically, the forms of words, sentence structures, and choice of vocabulary shows the differences between how parents and children communicate.
Yeah, like how parents say things are more family and children use informal words such as yuk as a let's go and enggak as a no. This makes the conversation in the story sounds natural and realistic.
And this study doesn't just describe language. It also shows that these linguistic patterns reflect authorities and dependence. Parents' speech symbolizes power, while children's language show emotion and individuality.
That's a beautiful way to see it. Language is a mirror of relationship.
Let's hear from our first guest, Lisa. Lisa, what do you think about this article?
Thank you. Personally, I think the article by Nurhayani and Rosin is really meaningful because it connects language with social structure. It shows that language isn't just a communication tool. It's also about identity and social roles. The way the authors break down the variations Morphological, synthetic, and lexical really helps us see how power and politeness are represented in stories. For instance, when parents use imperative verbs, they show authority, and when children use expressive language, they show curiosity and emotion.
That's such a good point.
Also, I like how the study used real published stories from a popular magazine, so the findings are very relatable. But one limitation, I think, is that the study focused only on written text, not on spoken interaction. So, it might not fully represent real conversations between parents and children.
Yes, that's true. Spoken language has tone and expression that can't always be captured in writing.
Exactly. Still, the article gives strong evidence that language in children's literature reflects social behavior and cultural expectation.
Okay, so thank you, Lisa, for your opinion and your elaboration to this topic. Okay, so we're gonna take a break for a while. So see you guys after the break. Hello guys, so welcome back to our podcast today. So let's continue to our discussion about today's topic.
Alright, so now let's move on to the second article by Wagner, Klopper, and Pitt 2014. This study looked at how children perceive dialect variation, basically whether young kids can notice when people speak differently.
Yes, the study involved 5 to 6 years old children and used 2 experiments. They compared how the children reacted to 3 types of English. Their home dialect English, which is Midland American English, a regional dialect, which is British English, and a second language dialect, which is Indian English.
In the first experiment, the children were asked to categorize speakers based on how they sound. They could easily tell the difference between their home dialect and the second language dialect, but not between the home and the regional one.
Right. And in the second experiment, when they were asked to match voices to cultural items like houses or clothes, they did better. This means children understand dialects more naturally when they link to culture.
So the researcher conclude that children don't see dialects as fixed category but as a scale of differences. They use their home dialect as the main references.
Now, let's bring in our second guest, Fatin. What's your take on this article?
Thanks, Nisrin. I found this article really fascinating because it uses experiments to show how children subconsciously process language. I like how the researchers combine categorization and association tasks. One shows what children are aware of, and the other shows what they sense without realizing it.
Yeah, that method is clever. It gives us a fuller picture of how kids think about language.
Exactly. The study also compared 3 dialects, which help us understand how children react to familiar versus unfamiliar speech. However, one weakness is the small sample. The children all came from one area, so it's hard to generalize the result.
Okay, that's true. But the overall findings still support the idea that children can connect dialects to social meaning from very young age.
Yes, even if they can't label dialects perfectly, they still associate certain ways of speaking with certain people or cultures. That's a big part of how social identity develops.
Now, let's connect both studies together. The first article shows how social dialects are represented in stories, and the second one shows how children perceive them in real life.
Exactly. One is about representation and the other about perception. Both tell us that children learn social meanings through language, and both from they read and what they hear.
I think these studies complement each other perfectly. The stories in Bobo magazine show how language can teach children social norms, while the experiments by Wagner and her team show how children apply those lessons in real life.
Yes, and together they prove that social dialect is not just about speech patterns, it's about identity, power, and belonging.
I totally agree, and as a future educators or researcher, we can use the understanding to design materials that expose children to diverse way of speaking.
That's true. By including different dialects in children's books and classrooms, we can promote tolerance and inclusivity.
Exactly, children should see dialect diversity as a normal and not something strange. Before we end, let's summarize what we have learned today.
Of course. Okay, from Nurhani and Rosin 2022, we learned that stories reflect real-life communication, parents' authority, and children's emotion. From Wagner, Klopper, and Pate 2014, we learned that children can perceive dialect differences and link them with social meaning.
Together, this study shows that social dialect is an important part of how children develop linguistically and socially. It shapes how they view identity, relationships, and community.
And for educators, this means we should encourage children to experience language diversity. It can build empathy and understanding.
Yes, and for researchers, it opens up more questions about how children learn to interpret the world through speech.
Beautifully said. Well, let's wrap up our episode for today.
Thank you to our lovely guests, Lisa and Fatim, for joining us.
And to our listeners, thank you for turning into Voices of Childhood. Don't forget to stay curious, keep learning, and appreciate the diversity of language.
Until next time, take care and goodbye.
Goodbye!